So good morning to everybody, thank you for joining the HSBC UK presentation on cyber security, the here and now. We've got a number of customers on the line who are joining us from across Herts, Beds and Bucks. I'm sure some of you are potentially in the offices or back in the offices, but I'm sure having a look at a few people who are sitting outside in their gardens or in another spot in their home. Thank you for joining us. I thought I'd just give a very quick, brief introduction to the event and what we're looking to achieve here, and then I can just kick off with some introductions. So, obviously, cybersecurity has always been a very important aspect for HSBC and obviously for you as our customers. As we see every single day different trends and different cyber crimes taking place. Clearly, with the advent of COVID-19 and everyone moving to working virtually online from home, the need to have a look at where a business is in terms of their cybersecurity roadmap and landscape, in terms of what protections you have, where you need to be, where you'd like to be, is even more important now because of the fact that everyone is working from home. So I'm really pleased to have two experts on the call with us today. So we've got an HSBC UK customer, which is A&O Cyber Security, and we've got Carl Turner, who was actually worked for the Big Four auditors and is now a cybersecurity consultant for A&O Cyber Security. We also have Alan Mordy, who is a fraud and cyber protection officer at the Hertfordshire Constabulary, so local to some of you. And he's also previously worked in the Serious Fraud and Cyber Crimes Unit for just over 5 years. So the agenda for today will be a presentation from A&O Cyber Security, so from Carl Turner, and he'll be covering the cybersecurity landscape as well as some current trends that are ongoing at the moment, especially, as I said, with the advent of COVID-19. We'll then take a short break, in essence, in order to put everyone into a breakout room, which if you're familiar with Zoom, you might know about the concept. If you're not, then at least you'll learn something else today. The purpose of that will just be a couple minutes for each of the experts that we've got, and Carl has got a few of his colleagues, Sanjeev, Brett and Richard, joining from A&O Cyber Security with him. And the point will be just for you as customers, just to share thoughts on where you are, any aspects from Carl's presentation that might have generated some questions for you potentially, and just to maybe share best practice on what you're seeing in your business, how you've been impacted and what you're doing. We'll then jump to Alan Mordy from Hertfordshire Constabulary, who will look at some more localised cyber attacks and crimes that have been taking place, as well as some support that can be offered from the police. At the end, we'll then have a short session just to mop up any additional Q&As as we go along. Unless anybody has any questions, I'll then look to hand over to Kyle.
Hi, everybody. My name is Carl Turner. I'm the cyber lead for A&O in the UAE. I'm just sharing my screen. You can all see that?
Yep, all good to go, Carl.
Thank you. So prior to joining A&O, I worked for Deloitte South Africa as the technical lead for blockchain, artificial intelligence and robotics, and that was in their cyber intelligence center in Johannesburg. After joining A&O, I now lead a team of cybersecurity consultants in Abu Dhabi, and we are responsible for the Middle Eastern region. So today I'd like to go over what the current cybersecurity landscape is. As David had mentioned, I'd like to thank HSBC UK Bank for giving us the opportunity to present today and to share a little bit about what we're seeing in the industry at the moment. So what we'll discuss, the three sections or topics that we'll be covering, is the current state of cybersecurity, what the emerging trends are from an offensive and defensive aspect, and then what a strategic journey might look like for an organization. There are quite a lot of slides in this presentation, and I am going to run through them quite quickly. So I'd ask you to please just hold off any questions that you have for the Q&A sessions at the end. So within the current state, we'll have a look at what the major losses are, where the major spending areas are, and what the cybersecurity workforce looks like at the moment. So let's have a look at some stats just to kind of put it in black and white. I'd like to highlight some of the major losses that we've been seeing anyway. So email scams are to top 26 billion in the next 3 years. That's quite a lot. The global loss of 3.5 billion. So the three areas mentioned here, payment fraud, romance scams, and spoofing, they account for the top three losses, and that's according to the FBI IC3. So they have an internet crime report on an annual basis. It kind of reports on what the complaints were and what was reported from cybercrime. So we're seeing a big rise in brand impersonation. So Apple, Net, and Yahoo are accounting for 25% of branded phishing attacks. So here, this is also from IC3, and this is the top international victim countries for 2019, excluding the US. So UK is number 1 on this list, and as you can see, the 93.7 thousand is a lot more than Canada's 3.7 thousand, which is the second, and obviously a lot more than all of these other countries combined. So we see that there's a big trend as cybercrime is targeting UK specifically. One, because I think a lot of people are very much connected, but at the same time, a lot of people are not privy to the security concerns involved with scamming. So at the moment, a little bit about like the security focus and what companies are actually doing. So even though there's losses, we're seeing that more than half of businesses are doing third-party assessments. More than 70% are doing physical access security, which we believe is very important. And more than 70% of businesses believe that a strong cyber capability will be a business driver. Yet we're still seeing a lot of these same losses year on year. So global IT spending, just to give a little bit of an idea of where all the money is going and where people are investing. So global IT spending 3.9 trillion for 2020, and information security spending is to increase to 151 billion by 2023, and that was estimated with a compound annual growth rate of 9.4%, and COVID has slightly affected that, and we'll have a look soon at what that new projection would be. So this is just a little bit of stats also specific to the UK, and we're seeing that cybersecurity is our #1 risk. We're seeing that a lot of money is being spent by banks each year, and on the far bottom right-hand corner, we can see that the total cybercrime economy in the UK alone is 1.5 trillion a year. So it's a huge profit for the cyber criminals. So yeah, this is also just a look at a budget and staff allocation in different domains of cybersecurity, and we're seeing a big increase in cyber monitoring and endpoint and network protection. So where are we spending exactly? So we're seeing an increase in spending in artificial intelligence and machine learning used for detection and prevention. And with COVID and post-COVID spending, we're still seeing a positive compound annual growth rate of 6.2%, down from the 9.4% that was previously forecasted. So at least this is still a positive growth for the industry. So we're also seeing deception technology, a lot of growth there. So what deception technology is and what the illustration is on the right hand side is kind of setting up a ruse for cyber criminals and attackers to lead them along a different path. So it might be that it's a spoofed network that a company has set up to look like a real organization, often called a honey net or a honeypot. And it's meant to lure attackers to think that there's valuable information there, but then it's actually just a place where they can be monitored and quarantined, and everything can be kind of assessed and analyzed from there without them getting access to the real crown jewels of the company. Unfortunately, we're still seeing small budgets in terms of cybersecurity, and that is a underlying problem. It is a bit of a grudge spend for a lot of businesses, but we have also seen that budgets have increased over the past couple of years. So this is also just another illustration of deception technology, and the purpose of it is to redirect them to something that they may think is valuable, then analyze what the attacker is doing, and ultimately quarantine them so that they can't cause any more harm. So what does the workforce look like? And here we'll focus mostly on Chief Information Security Officers or CISOs, and often they are burnt out. A lot of feeling very overwhelmed. They feel that they're set up to fail. They're thinking about quitting their jobs. Cybersecurity teams as a whole are often unsatisfied and don't have the right staffing requirements. And the unsatisfaction is largely due because a lot of resources are put into positions that they weren't initially hired for. So they may have to fulfill 2, 3, or 4 different cybersecurity roles because they're understaffed. And this then may turn into unhappy employees and people leaving onto other jobs where they're better suited or they're happier with the work that they're doing. So a big problem is also that we're seeing recruiters do not always understand. So from an HR perspective, they may not understand the technical skills that are required in a cybersecurity role. And this is ending up in placements that are not fulfilling the technical requirements of a role. And this again leads to frustration, not just from the company side, but as an employee as well. So there's a very high turnover rate, especially for cybersecurity. So these are the 4 faces of a Chief Information Security Officer, and they need to be a strategist. They need to kind of drive the vision forward for the business, and at the same time be a guardian and protect it. And they need to advise, and they need to lead, and they also need to be a technologist. And we're seeing that a lot of CISOs are feeling overwhelmed because they're seen as a stopper or a blocker for the business growth, and that's not always the case. They are there to protect it, and they're seeing things more from a risk perspective, whereas business development might be seeing it just from a sales perspective, and they need to get functionality and products out. But at the same time, the CISO needs to make sure that they're safe and secured. And this is largely why CISOs are feeling that they're set up to fail. So I've got a short clip here to just illustrate from a social engineering perspective. So social engineering is kind of phishing attacks and taking advantage of the human nature, which is to trust, and manipulating that to gain information out of an employee. So this is an illustration of that and what an attack might look like.
How did you decide to become a hacker?
Well, I'm not really sure what it means to become a hacker. That's like some guy in a hoodie who types really fast and stays up all night writing code and cracking passwords. It's not me. I just spy on people and see what makes them click. It's not a bad job.
Mark Hanning, CEO of Qualicard, set to report earnings after their blockbuster IPO.
So you consider this a job?
I put a lot of work into this. I'm not lazy. It takes research to figure out the key players, learn all about them, their families, their friends, what they care about. You have to understand the company's organization. I get a lot of my information from the sales department because They're always so quick and eager. They're hungry. People trust too easily. They don't look at the details. I do. Details matter. That's what I'm good at. It has to look completely believable. It has to look familiar. This is where research is important. It's not some generic piece of spam. It's an email from their boss with their company's signature. It's written in the voice of the boss. It's what he would say if he were writing this.
What about the malware itself? How does that work?
Somebody else out there already wrote all the code that does the actual attack. I'm just using it in the attachment. My skill is in my ability to get a bunch of people to click on that attachment. I always wonder what it's like when the whole thing unfolds on their end, when the panic sets in.
Please leave your message after the beep.
Hey, this is Rajiv in finance. Call me as soon as you get this. Something's up with my laptop. I can't.
Katie, are you on your way to the office? Something's going on with our file servers.
It's Karen in HR. Our benefits dashboard seems really slow. We're getting calls from users on it. Give me a call when you get this. Joining conference now.
Apparently, there's a malware attack targeting our main...
It's ransomware. They're holding us hostage. We're locked out of everything. I can't even check my phone. What about the backup?
That will take days.
We need this fixed now. Just pay it. We don't have a choice. We're reporting earnings in 2 hours.
But how do we know that
Just
they'll...
pay it. Put every single person on getting us back up and running. That's the only priority now. Okay, it's done. I have the decrypt key. Mark, we have a big problem. The ransomware was just to distract us. They got inside. They got everything. Customer data, financials, everything.
Qualicards is reeling today from the news that hackers have released the personal information of nearly
The
2
Nasdaq
million
closed
customers.
lower today, led by Qualicards, which was down 14% on news that their recent data breach may be far worse than the company
Its stock
originally
fell
acknowledged.
to a new all-time low on news that CEO Mark Hanning is stepping down after what is turning out to be one of the worst breaches of personal information in recent history.
Do you feel bad about releasing the personal information? All the financials? All the money that was lost?
All I did was get the files. I'm not the one that decided to release them. I'm not the one that shorted the stock. Somebody else had their reasons for that. It's above my pay grade. I was paid to do a job, and I did it well. And that's what's expected of anyone, isn't it? Anyway, markets bounce back.
So this is a very realistic example. Sorry, can you guys all hear me?
Yep, all good, go for it.
Okay, sorry. So this is a very realistic example of what a real attack situation might look like and what an attacker might do. And you might think that it's these guys sitting in a dark room with a hoodie on behind a keyboard, and it's not. It's more than often it's not the case. We've also done a number of these simulations, and the success rate is amazing. There's never a time that this has failed. For us, where we're doing social engineering campaigns, specifically around phishing campaigns, and the problem is that it looks so real, and that it is just so realistic. You wouldn't know the difference. The domain looks the same, the email looks the same, or the website that you're going to looks the same as what your company would do it. So it's very difficult to differentiate between what's real and what's not anymore. So the next section, we'll have a look at some of the emerging trends, and the purpose of the video was also just to give a little bit of a primer to this. So we'll have a look at what the attack trends are, and then also what some of the defense trends are. So firstly, COVID-19 scams that we need to be aware of. There has been a large increase in COVID news phishing or COVID related phishing attacks. We've seen an attack with Zoom in the past, in the beginning with the whole lockdown, and as this pandemic kind of started, we saw a lot of people attacking Zoom sessions, and that may mean just simply putting a funny background or not so funny background behind somebody, or there was actually an opportunity to upload files as well to all the participants' computers. So that was a little bit more dangerous, and that's because Zoom wasn't properly protecting who could access a session. But luckily that's been stopped now, so I don't think we have to worry too much about that. There's been an increase obviously in government relief type of things, and here is an example of a phishing email on the right hand side from gov.uk, and this is a tax refund, and they're saying you can now access some tax benefits because of the relief initiatives that the government has taken, and that you can then use that to protect yourself against COVID if you would like. But they put like a legitimate link at the bottom from NHS, but then the access your funds link is obviously the evil one. And this might look legitimate, some people might believe this. There are a lot of government relief initiatives at the moment, but I don't think that this was real. We've seen similar things with donations. Obviously, some people want to help, and attackers are always going to take advantage of that good nature. We also see in treatments and in-demand products, face masks, hand sanitizers, and those kind of things. And we're seeing an increase in attacks on children, I think largely because children are now at home. Most people have been at home and they're on their devices more. They might not have the same security knowledge as what an adult would, and if they're sent a link for a free game or something that might entice them, they will most likely click on it. So these are just different twists on phishing scams, and phishing has been around for a long time, so that's not a new trend, but attackers will always take advantage of what's in the news, what people are searching on a daily basis, and use that to try and help their attacks. So here we're seeing that on the left hand side, the graph shows that 62% of IT security spending is going towards networks. We've seen large endpoint and web as well, but the least is toward email, yet 93% of all breaches are targeting people, and most of those, almost 100% of those, are via email. So there is still not enough spending in terms of the area that we should be focusing on more. Can we just ask everyone to please mute in the background? So yeah, we're seeing some more attack trends. So deep fakes is something that has been emerging over the last couple of years, and this may not have a direct correlation to cybersecurity, but could be used in terms of a larger phishing campaign of some sort. So this is where attackers or people are using AI, artificial intelligence, to manipulate images and videos. And also another instance, people are now spoofing voices for authentication mechanisms that might use voice recognition. And we've seen an increase in this, and we'll see later on after this section, we will see a video presentation or an example of a deep fake video. And we're also seeing an increase in synthetic identities. It's also not something new, but it's now becoming easier for criminals to do, and they're paying a little bit more attention to the details. So this is where a fake identity is made up to look like a real person. So it might span a number of years. They might have birth certificates, fingerprints associated to that, and the whole thing, to the point that they have bank accounts and even credit records. So when you look at it on paper, it looks very much like a real identity, and that's making it more difficult to bypass AIs that detect fraud and try and prevent fraud in automated systems. So that's mostly where they're using these type of attacks. And we're also seeing more AI-powered attacks, where AI is now used to write emails that mimic human behavior, and that's quite a scary one as well, that now it might not be a person that's writing an email that looks like it came from your boss, but that could actually be written by an artificial intelligence bot. We're also seeing attacks on AI systems called poisoning attacks. So on the right-hand side, there's an example of this. So while the AI, and this might be fraud protection or KYC kind of AI, or it might be something to do with cybersecurity, but while it's busy learning, the training data is being poisoned and malicious data is added into the legitimate data. So once the AI has been trained, the AI is not able to detect what benign and malicious data looks like, and it then thinks that the malicious data is benign as well, and it will let it through. So this is very difficult to mitigate and detect. So it might be that somebody already has access to your network, and that's the problem here. So we're also seeing disinformation being spread a lot more now, and this is also something that might not correlate directly to cybersecurity, but perhaps a deep fake video that's spreading fake news may be used as part of a larger phishing campaign, for instance. So we all know this guy, and this is now showing how much the cybersecurity landscape has changed. Everybody's now working from home. Everybody's using remote instances to access their data. It makes it a lot more difficult now for businesses to protect their employees and to protect their data and their information. So also an issue that we're seeing with this now is our home networks are obviously not as secure as your corporate network. So all of that network protection and endpoint protection that you have in place at your business means nothing when it's on a home network where the router or the inbuilt firewall on that router hasn't been updated in years. Most people never update those things. So also the problem with this is that now an attacker can gain access to two networks, a husband's company as well as a wife's company simultaneously by just accessing their home network. So this now changes the landscape for attackers. It's made it a lot easier now for them to be able to access this stuff. As long as you're not this guy, it was a bit of a fail on a remote working thing. There's a whole stream of videos of these coming up that are quite funny. So what are the defenders doing? Obviously, we're using AI systems, AI-based immune systems especially, and one of those that are already doing it well is Darktrace, and that's a capability that A&O has acquired as well. These other market-leading technologies on the right-hand side that have been mentioned are all technologies that we kind of depend on as well to some extent to protect our customers. We're seeing software-defined networks helping in security now and helping defend against some of the more traditional networking attacks. Event monitoring and orchestration and automation are becoming a big part of the whole response lifecycle as well. And managed security is becoming a lot more outsourced, so you don't always have to have the in-house resources to take care of every single aspect. We're seeing a lot of these aspects being outsourced to third parties as well. Data privacy and protection is becoming a very big issue. It's becoming more and more complex to guard data as it sits in multiple locations, it traverses different networks, and the penalties that are associated with it are becoming bigger as well. So it's very much in organizations' best interest to protect the data of their customers. And also CISOs are rethinking the strategy a little bit in terms of hiring and seeing that yes, there's value to having some resources in-house, but they're also looking for third-party suppliers that are reliable and that are able to assist with some of the journey, because it's not a silver bullet at all. There's so many different facets of cybersecurity, and it's almost impossible to manage everything on your own. So you very much do need some people to help you along the way. So this is a deep fake video. Discretion is advised. There's a little bit of bad language in this, so if you've got some young kids or something running around, maybe ask them to hold their ears. But it's nothing too bad. But I think this is a little bit controversial, but it speaks very much to the point of the effect that deepfake videos can have.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time, even if they would never say those things. So, for instance, they could have me say things like, I don't know, Killmonger was right, or Ben Carson is in the sunken place, or, how about this, simply, President Trump is a total and complete dipshit. Now, you see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele. This is a dangerous time. Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet. It's a time when we need to rely on trusted news sources.
So, again, I think this is pretty obvious when you look at the video closely, but to most people, this might not be noticeable. And it's scary to see where the technology has come to be able to do something like this and suddenly use somebody else's face and make them say things in their voice that they would maybe never say. So it's very important that we take heed of the things that are happening and we are able to protect against it, to at least be knowledgeable enough to see it as well. So as I mentioned, it might be that something like this is then used to spread fake news, and off the back of that, a phishing campaign goes out. And if done properly, this can have massive impact as well. So next, we'll have a look at a bit of the strategic journey, the approach that A&O Cyber Security would take, as well as what our cybersecurity roadmap may look like. At the end of the presentation, we have a basics assessment, which is the beginning of our roadmap life cycle, and it's to help assess where you are within our 4 pillars of cybersecurity, which I'll go through with you. So this is something that is meant to add value back to you guys, and you can access this. We'll provide a link to it as well as a QR code that you can scan now if you want to go through it. It's very short, it's a couple of questions, and it helps just assess where you are within the different stages. And if you would like us to contact you afterwards, you are able to leave your details, but that's not a necessity. This is more for us just to give you something of value back at the end of the presentation. So our approach is to keep it very simple. The one thing we like to do is, well, education is very important. So you need to ask yourself a couple of questions. What level of education do you have, and how is it impacting the company? Is it measurable? So if you have a very low level of education, you might see that you're getting an increase in people clicking on bad links, for instance. Whereas if you have a high level of education, you might see that the impact of that is that you have less of those cases. So that's something that's fairly easy to implement and to monitor, and that's kind of the starting point of any strategy. Also, we believe you need to keep it relevant, keep efforts related to cybersecurity relevant to where the company is in the process. It doesn't help that you start right at the most advanced stuff and you get the best technologies and you go all out with your budget when you don't have the basics in place. And often we see that that's where attackers will gain entry, is with very basic things that are often overlooked. And it might be something as simple as just educating your users to what not to click. And we'll see a little bit more about that from Alan's talk, about how you can actually prevent some of these social engineering attacks from being successful. So the strategy always needs to keep business initiatives at the primary focus. So if you're a bank and you're providing a banking app to your customers, that is your focus. Yes, it needs to be secure and it needs to be protected, but it's a banking app and it's focused on your customers. So keep that at the forefront of your cybersecurity strategy as well, and keep it practical. Where is the business now? Where do you want to be in, say, a year's time or in 2 years' time? And then keep it measurable. Have the structured approach, have a timeline as a project, and then continuously just refer back to your roadmap, where you are and where you need to be. So this is the 4 pillars that we have evaluated and kind of assessed to be where most companies find themselves in one of these 4 areas. And it might be that you are doing some of the aspects on the more advanced side, but you're actually leaning more towards the ready side as overall. And that's the purpose of our basics assessment, is to put you in one of these 4 pillars to give you a starting point of where you should go. So these are 16 of our overall services, and number 1 is the basics review that we will give you access to. And this is just to help identify where to start that roadmap and some of the things that you might look at. It doesn't pigeonhole anybody. It's not meant for that. It's merely to see where are your efforts focused on and where might your efforts be focused on better in the future. So these are all of the services that we offer along with that, and we won't go through all of this now. That's not the purpose of this presentation, but it's just to give you an overview of how vast the spectrum is for cybersecurity and all of the different components that go into it. And you might be doing 5 or 10 or 20 of these items already, but you might still not be matured in the most basic stuff like policies and compliance, or you may have those in place, but there's room for improvement. So it helps to kind of gauge where you are in the entire life cycle, and not looking at it as a one-stop shop of like doing everything on your own and you've got it all covered, but being able to see that there's other components that you may not have thought of. So this is the link to the assessment, and all it is, again, is to put you in one of those 4 baskets or stages of the cybersecurity lifecycle and where you might be. So you guys can scan the QR code. I'll give you a little bit of time to do that. This is the end of the presentation, or you can follow the link. We will also share the slide with everybody that's on the call. So if you guys didn't catch some of the details, or you would like some further information about this stuff, or you'd like to do the review a little bit later, then you'll be able to do that as well. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present, and we hope that this was valuable to you as well.
Perfect. So thanks for that, Carl. I think you've set the scene really well in terms of how big the issue is on the cybersecurity point of view, and really helping the customers on the call to start to look at where they are in the cybersecurity landscape to see whether they might need a bit more assistance, and that could come from their existing provider or somebody like yourself, or even when Alan speaks now about getting some support potentially from the police and some online resources.